They say peace is just the quiet between storms. But for me, peace was routine. Every morning before the sun even thought about showing up, I'd grab my boots, feed the chickens, walk the fence line, and check the runoff ditch beside my old barn. It wasn't fancy, just a shallow channel carved by years of rain, but it kept my land breathing. I didn't think much about it back then. It was just something I did, like brushing your teeth or locking the door before bed. You don't notice the things that protect you until someone takes them away. My name's Ray Harlan, 58 years old, retired civil engineer, widower, and the kind of man who keeps his tools cleaner than his kitchen. After 30 years with the Army Corps, I bought this patch of land out on the edge of Silver Creek Meadows, half neighborhood, half country. The folks here used to be quiet, decent. You waved at each other, borrowed sugar, shared stories about the weather. But then new blood came in, the kind that treats an HOA like a throne instead of a committee. And sitting on that throne was Deborah Collings. Sharp haircut, sharper tongue, clipboard always tucked under her arm like a badge of righteousness. She could turn a barbecue into a board meeting just by showing up. For years, that drainage ditch beside my barn kept me safe. The hills behind us would bleed water every spring, and that ditch would carry it right where it needed to go, down toward the city's retention basin. But one afternoon, I got this letter, thin paper, expensive ink, telling me that my unauthorized trench violated community aesthetic standards. I laughed out loud. Unauthorized? That ditch had been there before the neighborhood was even built. Hell, the original subdivision map marked it as a natural runoff channel. I figured it was a mix-up, maybe some new intern checking boxes, so I wrote back politely, attached photos, diagrams, even a snippet from the county hydrology report. 2 weeks later, another letter came. Same logo, colder words. Failure to comply may result in fines. That's when I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was her. Deborah had been talking for months about beautifying the perimeter zones. Translation: she wanted everything to look like a magazine cover, even if it meant strangling the land that held us up. I should have seen it coming. 3 Fridays later, I came back from the feed store and found 2 contractors filling in my trench. Gravel, soil, paving stones neatly stacked. My heart just about stopped. I asked them what the hell they were doing, and the younger one looked apologetic. Just following HOA orders, sir. And there she was, walking up the path in wedge heels like she owned the place. We're upgrading the area, she said, smiling that fake smile. It'll look much nicer. It wasn't meant to look nice, I told her. It was meant to move water. She tilted her head, patronizing like I was a child who didn't understand progress. Maybe it's time we modernize, Mr. Harlan. That night I sat in the barn long after dark, listening to the rain tapping the tin roof. It wasn't heavy, but it sounded different, like it was warning me. I couldn't shake the memory of that night 15 years ago. Me and my wife Linda out there in the mud, digging with shovels in the middle of a storm, trying to save that same barn from flooding. She'd laughed through her tears, said, "This land just needs a little respect." I swore I'd never let it happen again. But Deborah didn't know that story, and she didn't care. The next morning I stepped outside to find my ditch gone, buried beneath gravel and decorative shrubs like a grave. The ground looked neat, sure, but sterile, wrong. Water has memory. It remembers where to go, and when you block it, it finds another way. 3 weeks later, the sky cracked open. Not one of those slow, forgiving rains, but a hard, cold one that sinks into the soil until it can't drink anymore. I could hear the ground gurgle. Honest to God, you can hear it if you've lived close to the earth long enough. Water started pooling by the barn's north wall. At first, it just shimmered. Then it spread. I knew exactly what was coming. By midnight, my yard was a swamp. The gravel path Deborah's crew installed was underwater, her little shrubs drowning in their own vanity. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the water. It was slithering downhill toward the community clubhouse. Now that place, that was her crown jewel. Faux stone pillars, espresso bar, yoga studio, all funded by special assessments. I walked over just to see, not to help. The mulch beds were collapsing. The parking lot was shimmering with runoff. I shook my head and muttered, "You asked for pretty, you got it." By 2 a.m., the patio gave way. You could hear it, this dull whump like the ground just sighed and gave up. The lights flickered, the power went out, and all that was left was the sound of rain chewing through what used to be their pride and joy. When the sun came up, I walked past the clubhouse. Mud everywhere, chairs half buried. Deborah was standing there in pink rain boots, staring like she'd just discovered gravity. She saw me but didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The lesson was written in every muddy footprint on her brand new tiles. I wanted to feel smug, but all I felt was tired. This didn't need to happen. So I gathered everything, every photo, every report, every time-stamped video I'd taken, and dropped it off at the HOA office. No note, no message, just proof. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I half expected another notice, maybe even a lawyer. But it was Deborah herself. No clipboard this time, no heels. Just a soaked jacket and eyes that had finally met reality. "Mr. Harlan," she started, voice barely above a whisper. "We've reviewed your documentation. We'd like your help in remediation planning." I almost laughed. "Remediation," I said. "That's what you call fixing your own mess." She winced. "We're prepared to compensate you for your time." "It's not about money," I told her. "It's about doing it right. This land doesn't care about your bylaws or your decorative stones. It only listens to gravity." That night I filed a formal report with the city. Every violation, every unpermitted alteration, every threat they'd sent me. Greg Myers, a city engineer and an old friend, backed me up. Within a week, the city opened an investigation. Turns out, the HOA had not only ignored local drainage codes, they'd broken state environmental laws. The next HOA meeting was online, because, well, their clubhouse was still buried in silt. I joined late, my name popping up on their screen like a ghost. Deborah tried to hold it together, all smiles and empty words about moving forward. I waited, then unmuted my mic. "Before you move forward," I said, "you might want to look back. I told you this would happen. You buried a live artery under gravel because you cared more about appearances than physics. And now everyone's paying for it." A neighbor's voice chimed in, Mrs. Garza, who lived downhill. "My garden's gone. All my roses. Why didn't anyone tell us the runoff was redirected?" And just like that, the tide turned. One by one, voices rose, angry, hurt, embarrassed. You could see it in Deborah's face. Control slipping away like water through her fingers. By the end of that call, the board agreed to step down. No applause, no fanfare, just silence and the faint sound of rain on their microphones. For the next week, city inspectors swarmed the place. Greg came by, clipboard in hand, shaking his head. "They really filled your drainage on a floodplain, huh?" He said, "That's a Class B violation. They're lucky no one got hurt." I told him they'd asked me to design the fix. He chuckled. "Then maybe this neighborhood's got a chance." So I did what I'd always done best. I drew. Late nights in the barn, surrounded by maps and coffee and the low hum of the radio. I designed a system that could survive not just rain, but stupidity. Deep gravel veins, French drains, reinforced channels lined with stone. Over-engineered maybe, but that's the point. When I brought the plans to Deborah, she looked different. Smaller somehow. Her hair wasn't perfect anymore. She flipped through the drawings, tracing the lines with her finger. "You're really giving us another chance?" "No," I said. "I'm giving the land one." She didn't argue, just nodded quietly. But the weather doesn't wait for paperwork. Before the new trenches could be dug, another storm rolled in. Heavy, humid air, the kind that smells like iron before the first drop hits. I was out checking my sandbags when I saw Deborah pacing by the ruined clubhouse, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up and shouted over the wind, "They're saying we might lose power tonight." "Then move your car," I yelled back. "It's parked right in the runoff path." "What?" "Just trust me." Seconds later, the hill behind the clubhouse gave a low groan. I'll never forget that sound. It's what the earth makes right before it remembers what gravity feels like. The slope slid. Not a full collapse, but enough to send a wave of mud rolling straight toward her car. We ran, she got in, reversed just in time. The mud swallowed the parking spot where her SUV had been seconds before. She sat there shaking, rain drumming on the windshield. I tapped on the glass and pointed toward the sandbags. "We're not done yet. Help me." And to her credit, she did. For hours, we worked side by side, throwing sandbags, digging channels by hand. Neighbors came out too, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Even the teenager who always blasted music showed up with a shovel. For the first time, Silver Creek Meadows felt like a real community. By morning, the rain stopped. Steam rose off the soaked earth. The clubhouse was half buried again, but no one was hurt this time. And as the sun broke through the clouds, I realized something. Sometimes you have to let something collapse before people can rebuild right. That's when the city stepped in officially. Fines, audits, investigations, the whole machine. The HOA was dissolved, replaced by a community council that actually listened. They asked me to lead it. I said no at first, but I kept showing up anyway. Old habits die hard. The first few months after the storm felt like rehab for the land and for us. The mud was thick, the air smelled like wet clay, and half the neighbors didn't know whether to plant flowers or fences. But slowly we started learning. We built new trenches, deeper, smarter, lined with rock and native grass. We added a bioswale behind the lower lots, a kind of living sponge that drank the overflow. And you know what? It worked. Kids started calling it the Little River. I didn't mind. At least they respected it. Deborah showed up again one morning while I was tightening the gate hinge. She didn't say much, just handed me a notebook filled with sketches and notes. "I've been studying soil composition," she said quietly, "trying to understand what we missed." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who once thought control meant perfection was now out here, learning how mud breathes. I just nodded. "Good start," I said. Word spread. Neighbors started asking questions, real ones. How do I stop pooling near my porch? What plants help with erosion? Before I knew it, I was holding workshops on Saturday mornings out by the new rain garden. Fold-out tables, coffee and thermoses, hand-drawn charts taped to a fence. 20 people showed up that first time. By the third, we had 40. Even Deborah sat in the back, taking notes. I told them, water doesn't hate you. It just wants a place to go. And they listened. Over the next year, the community changed. The lawns weren't cookie-cutter perfect anymore, but the land was healthy. Birds returned. The air smelled like life again, not fertilizer. The HOA Nightmare faded into a story we'd tell newcomers, half warning, half folklore. And then came the letter from the city. Official header, thick paper again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a certificate of recognition. Silver Creek Meadows, Outstanding Community Resilience Award. They even included my name, though I told them not to. Greg from the city stopped by to hand me a plaque. "You turned a flood zone into a model," he said. "Hell of a thing," I told him. "I just let the land do what it wanted to do." He laughed. "That's the smartest engineering there is." Later that evening, Deborah came by. The sky was soft pink, the kind of color that makes even scars look beautiful. She stood by the new trench, watching the water glide through it like silk. "You know," she said, "if we'd listened earlier, maybe the old clubhouse would still be standing." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it took losing something shiny for us to finally see what mattered." She smiled faintly, then turned serious. "I'm sorry, Ray. Not just for the trench, for how I treated you. I thought running this neighborhood meant keeping it spotless. But I see now, spotless isn't the same as alive." I didn't say much, just nodded and watched the water with her. Sometimes silence says more than forgiveness ever could. Months passed, and Silver Creek Meadows kept healing. The new council ran smoothly, rotating members, open meetings, real discussions instead of decrees. Even Paul, the guy who used to mow diagonal stripes in his lawn twice a week, switched to native grass and started bragging about the butterflies it brought. Funny how disaster can bleach arrogance out of a community. One evening, as I sat on the porch with my coffee, I saw Deborah walking along the ridge, mud on her boots, notebook in hand. She stopped, crouched, traced a stream of water with her fingers like she was taking its pulse. I smiled. Maybe she finally got it. A week later, she left a book on my porch. Hydrology and Urban Living. Inside the cover, she'd written, "You taught me more than this book ever could. Thank you for not walking away." I didn't need the words, but I appreciated them, because the truth is I almost did walk away. There were nights when I thought about selling the place, starting over somewhere without meetings or bylaws or battles over grass height. But every time I tried, I'd walk out to that barn, see the trench winding like an old scar through the soil, and I'd remember what Linda said that night in the rain. This land just needs respect. So I stayed. One summer afternoon, Greg showed up again with a grin and a clipboard. "We're nominating Silver Creek Meadows for the State Resilience Pilot," he said. "You'll be on the brochure. Don't put my name on it," I told him. "Put the lands." He laughed, shook his head, and drove off, leaving me standing there with the smell of hot grass and the sound of water trickling exactly where it belonged. You know, sometimes I think about that first night, the rain hitting the tin roof, me sitting there angry and helpless while someone paved over years of wisdom. And I realize it wasn't just a fight about a ditch. It was a fight about listening to people who came before, to what the earth is trying to say when it cracks or floods or shifts under your boots. Now, every time it rains, I walk the line, boots sinking just a little in the damp soil, coffee in hand, watching the water glide by. It's not defiance anymore. It's gratitude, because this place remembers, and so do I. You can't fight nature into submission. You can only work with it, or it'll teach you the hard way. So I guess that's my story. A stubborn old engineer, a buried trench, a lesson carved out of mud and pride. What do you think? Was I right to stand my ground? Or was Deborah just trying to keep things tidy and went too far? Tell me in the comments, because every neighborhood's got its battles, and sometimes the hardest floods aren't made of water.